I've had the extraordinary pleasure of visiting Australia before, spending time in Sydney, snorkeling at the Great Barrier Reef, going to Canberra, meeting crocodiles and kangaroo, and I am very pleased that finally I'm here in Melbourne, which I first glimpsed on my family's very small black and white television screen during the Olympics in 1956. And before you do all the calculation, that was a really long time ago. Like many Americans when I was growing up, what I knew about Australia was great open spaces, lots of exotic flora and fauna, really hardy people, kind of like the Wild West, but with better beer, and a lot more of a sense of pioneering spirit at that time. And, of course, I'm sure that for many of you, from afar, the United States looks as though every American is living his or her own reality TV show. And part of what I'm doing as Secretary of State is not only meeting with the leaders of governments like yours here in Australia, but also meeting with citizens, particularly young people, because I want America's outreach around the world to go far beyond the government halls and all of the official back and forth, and to have a chance to hear what is on your minds, as well as for you to ask me questions. Our two countries have a lot in common. We are both pluralistic democracies, founded by immigrants and pioneers and dreamers who didn't take no for an answer and refused to accept limits on what they thought was possible. We have been, and I hope always will be, nations that are ready to face the future without fear, rolling up our sleeves and getting on to whatever the next challenge might be. Now, of course, we have differences, and we may go into some of that during the question and answer period. I've never understood why you would ruin a perfectly good slice of bread with Vegemite. But I'm sure you have some of the same reactions when you travel to our country and see what we eat. I had hoped to be here last January, but I was on my way when the earthquake in Haiti struck and felt compelled to turn around and go back and help supervise and organize our relief efforts there. And of course, I knew Australians would understand, because Australians have responded with such generosity to disasters among your neighbors. After the tsunami in 2004, Australia sprang into action, sending rescue teams, doctors, supplies all over the region. And more recently, Australian medical teams have helped the people of Pakistan cope with the devastation of the terrible flooding there. I think that is one of the most important qualities we have in common, an impulse of generosity that is embedded deep in our national character, regardless of political affiliation. Both Australia and the United States work to advance not only our own interests as we see them, but also to protect friends and allies, to work toward the causes of peace, prosperity, and justice for people everywhere. It's just who we are. It's in our DNA, and it helps to explain the enduring bond between us. And today, in a time of such complex challenges, from climate change to nuclear proliferation, the world needs nations like ours that accept the responsibility of working together to solve shared problems. Leadership from countries like Australia and America, and the strength of the alliance that binds us, is more important than ever, not only regionally, but globally as well. Australia has always understood and accepted this responsibility. It has increased military cooperation with Malaysia and Singapore, provided crucial assistance in Timor-Leste's transition to independence, and led stabilization forces in the Solomon Islands. And your efforts to promote sustainable development around the world reflect an understanding of how important it is to lend a hand to those in need. And your sending peacekeepers to dangerous missions in troubled lands sets a very good model. For our part, since the first days of the Obama administration, the United States has reaffirmed our commitment to be an active partner and leader in the Asia Pacific. We're practicing what we call forward deployed diplomacy, sending our diplomats and our development experts across the region. This is my sixth visit to the Asia Pacific as Secretary of State. The President is making his second, as we are here in Australia. He's in India, then he goes on to Indonesia, then to the G20 meeting in Seoul, Korea, and then the APEC meeting in Yokohama, Japan. We are working very hard to build even stronger our historic alliances with Japan, South Korea, Thailand, the Philippines, and of course Australia. And we know that the relationship and the treaty alliance between us has really been forged in war, but it is founded on our shared love of peace. Yes, our soldiers have fought side by side from the trenches of World War I to the mountains of Afghanistan in defense of democracy and our common values. And Americans will never forget that after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, Australia invoked our treaty alliance. That meant a great deal to us. And we grieved with you after terrorists murdered 88 Australians in Bali. And we have renewed our determination not only to defeat violent extremism, but to offer alternatives and a different vision of the future to people who might otherwise be unwilling to pick sides. So the United States has no better friend than Australia, and it is a partnership that we have to keep evolving. We can't just look to the past and say, haven't we been great together? We have to say, what do we now need to do going forward? Let me just mention a few issues. First, on security. Our future security depends on our abilities to adapt to emerging threats and unexpected challenges. So today that means cooperating to keep the seas safe from piracy, protecting our computer networks and infrastructure from cyber attacks, and finding more effective ways to prevent and respond to natural disasters. That's especially important here, where earthquakes, typhoons, and tsunamis continue to batter our friends and neighbors, as I experienced with one of the aftershocks in Christchurch at 2:43 in the morning the other day. We know that this will be a continuing set of very difficult problems, and we need to be smarter about how we address them. Unfortunately, if climate change continues unchecked, natural disasters may only become more frequent and more deadly. And I want to thank the people of Australia for being leaders in trying to figure out how best to deal with climate change. I think it's understandable because in this region of the world, including here in Australia, you're subject to some of the worst effects, from rising ocean levels and extreme weather to drought and mass migration. Later this month, the nations of the world will meet in Cancun to continue the work we started in Copenhagen. And it's especially important to recognize that the very existence of a lot of our small Pacific Island neighbors is at stake. So we want to step up our work together on climate change, and later today I will go with the Prime Minister to look at some of the renewable energy programs that you are doing here. We need to do more to work with our Pacific Island friends, and last week I was pleased to announce that our development agency, USAID, will open a new office in Fiji to serve as a base for work throughout the region. And we will work on health, we will work on women's empowerment, we will work on good governance, but we will pay special attention to a new fund we're creating of $21 million for these small island nations to adapt to climate change. And we're going to be working together with Australia to persuade the military government in Suva to meet its commitment to bring democracy back to Fiji. In the short term, we would like to see steps that advance political freedom, such as allowing professional civilians to return to key government ministries. But we're going to look for new opportunities, and the foreign minister addressed some of those in our press conference yesterday. We want to forge a close working relationship on development needs between the United States and Australia, particularly on education, health, women's empowerment, and sustainable economic development, as well as championing democracy and human rights. Increasing trade and spurring economic growth is one of our additional major goals. We think it's a win-win for Australia and the U.S. Our free trade agreement has boosted jobs in both countries, and I will see more of that when I do an event about trade between Australia and the United States later this afternoon. To continue this progress, we are both pressing ahead on something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's an ambitious, multilateral free trade agreement that would bring together many more nations of the Pacific Rim. Australia and the United States are helping to lead those negotiations. And we're also working through APEC, which the United States will host in Hawaii in 2011. We see that as a pivotal year to drive progress on internal economic changes that will open more markets and make sure that any growth is more sustainable and inclusive. And finally, we believe that the United States and Australia have been at the forefront of figuring out how to organize the entire region for the future. It's not enough just for us to have a strong bilateral relationship. How do we interact with everyone else? And Kevin Rudd has been one of our best consultants on how best to do this. The foreign minister's arguments helped convince both President Obama and me to join the East Asia Summit. Because we think being part of the regional architecture in the region is absolutely essential. Together, we're engaging emerging powers like China, India, and Indonesia, and with burgeoning partners like Vietnam, Singapore, and Malaysia. Clearly, China's rapid growth in recent years is among the most consequential developments in the Asia-Pacific, indeed in the world. And both the United States and Australia reject the zero-sum view that some have, that one country's rise means another country's decline. We're actually working to build a positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship for China. This relationship between Australia and China, between the U.S. and China, and among the three of us is one of the most consequential that we have. So we're committed to getting this right.